Hilchis Sha'ar Avos Hatumos Perek Sheni. Now, the din of shchita, when shchita be'em is not necessarily right after it's shachud, the item that was shachud died. Even when talking about a person, for example, we learned that if it was nishchata b'shnei simonim, he still has the din of a chai. As long as he's still mefarches, he has the din of a chai. Now, there is a behema be'etzem. Even after the shchita, would have a din of a chai. There's just a special din that since it was nishchata behema teira, that was nishchata kahalacha, so the shchita is matter the behema, even though it's mefarcheses. B'medvar mamorning, you're talking about a behema teira that was nishchata. A behema tmeya that was nishchata, there's no din shchita by behema tmeya. So memela, since there's no din shchita and it's mifarcheses, so therefore the behema tmeya still has the din as if it's alive. If it's alive, so it can't be tamid tumas nevela. Tumas nevela is only when it dies. So memela, that's the din that a behema tmeya that was nishchata and it's mifarcheses. So memela, it still has a din of a behema chai, and memela, it's not tamid tumas nevela. But nevertheless, since it was nishchata al Yisrael and be'etzem for a yid when he would shech the behema teira, so it would have a din of a shchita and it would be matter the basar. So therefore, this basar of the behema tmeya was nishchata is metame tumasechlu. So then that it's metame tumasechlu. So on one end we're saying that it's still alive and therefore it's not an avela. If it's still alive, l'chur, it can be metame tumasechlu. So on the other we say no, that since it was nishchata and such a shchita would be master the basar to the Yisrael, so therefore it's metame tumasechlu, and it doesn't have to touch anything to be metame tumasechlu. Whereas since it's safer l'tame tumas nevela, so nevela was a yarda to be metame tumasechlu without anything. But that's only if it was nishchata al yedei Yisrael l'tzerech hagoy. If it was nishchata al yedei Yisrael l'tzerech hagoy, so then this oichel, this behemoth meya, is metame tumasechlu. Masha'enkin, the Rambam doesn't say it here, but the Rambam says it later in tumasechlu. But if it was nishchata al yedei Yisrael l'tzerech Yisrael, so since a yid can't eat a behemoth tmeya, so the fact that he was shechted l'tzerech Yisrael is batla daite. Memela, it's as if he didn't shecht it, and memela, it's not metame, not nevela, not tumasechel. Is nachamol. A behemoth bemis which is mefarcheses is still alive, and therefore it's not metame tumas nevela because it's still alive. And bemis, since it's still alive, so it shouldn't either be metame tumasechel, because it's alive. So oichel can only be when the behemoth is not alive. Masha'in came, there's a special din that if it was nishchata ayidei Yisrael l'tzerech goy, so then this behemoth, which is mefarcheses, is metame tumasechel, which means it becomes tamid din of tumasechel. Let's learn inside. Perek Sheni. Behemoth ichaya tmeya shenishchata eina metame mishum nevela kol zman she mefarcheses. Acha Hatumos, because it's still alive. Oi, another option is achiatis is reisha. So when it's yatis is reisha, you cut off the head. So then even lepel, if it's mefarchesed, it no longer has the din of being alive, and then it has the din of an avela. And vahareyu, what is this din of this behemoth shenitma, behemoth tmeya shenishchata? Is harehi ka oichlun tmeya. It has a din of oichlun tmeya. Is nachamar a behemoth tmeya shenishchata a shchita ksheira? So then it doesn't have a din of an avela because it's still mefarcheses. With the one still mefarcheses, but on the other end, since it was nishchata, it has a din of eichlun tmeim. However, nechare knows he stabbed it, and varei mefarcheses is ein ba'afilu tumas eichlun. Calls mashi mefarcheses. It doesn't have a din of an avela. It doesn't have a din of tumas eichlun. It's a live behemoth. It's ein achinam. It's a live behemoth which is about to die. But until it actually dies, while it's still mefarcheses, it has a din of a live behemoth, so it's not an avela, and it's not eichlun tmeim. Now the aver hapoirish mimah for cheses. When you have an aver that comes off from ches, now a guy is the osir be'aver menachai is osir lebnei neach kipeirish menachai. So the for a guy this aver would be osir ke'aver menachai, would be osir menachai. Now by a yid it's not shaykhs, because by a yid if it was nishchata a behema tahira. If a behemoth tahira was nishchata kahalacha, so then even though it was mefarcheses, this is a din of nishchata, and that was matter. So there's no din of ever menachai. On the other end, if you're going to take a behemoth tmeya and be poirish, so it's not a din of ever menachai, because lapel for a yid, since it's a behemoth tmeya, so it's a behemoth tmeya nisachal alisar, so there's no din of ever menachai. So the this din we're talking about an ever aperish mefarcheses is also b'nei kerish menachai al derech zeh l'mashal. If you have a behema which was nishchata shalei halacha, it was nishchata shalei halacha, and it was mefarches, and a behemoth teir, I'm sorry, that was nishcha to shleika halacha, and it's mefarcheses. So then also, if an aver comes off as such a behemoth, so it's also to Yisrael, also kevim and achai. That's the same thing. The aver aperish mefarcheses also l'neir keperish men abchai. Upsara aperish menu is keperish men achai. Is again. So it has a din of achai. The kudas advarim mefarcheses has a din of achai. Except if it was nishchata, a behemoth teira that was nishchata halacha is no longer a din of achai. So b'negeya. So it's not Matame Tumas Nevela, it's the special, it's Matame Tumas Eichlin, and an Eber HaPerish Min HaMefarcheses, which is a Behemoth Tmeya, is Keperish Min HaChai. V'chein, Teira, Shenifsa Lo Bishchitasa, and V'adayin Himi Farcheses, a Shachat B'yechad Erivechad, is also Ein Lo Tuma Klal, it's not considered Tomei, because it's not considered a Nevela, Achetomas. And Achetomas, notice this din also applies to a Behemoth Teira, which was Nishchatosh, which was nifsala b'shchitasa. So Mela, the shchita wasn't matter. If the shchita wasn't matter, so Mela is still considered alive, and therefore it doesn't have any tumah. Chilek ha-behema l'shnayim. You cut the behema off and you divide it into two parts. It's completely divided into two parts. You took off a leg, and also there's the hollow space that the leg left over. There's a hollow space in the behema that came out together with this yarech. Is a rezu nevela, so the behema becomes right away in nevela. No, that doesn't have a din of a chai that nishchata. No, it's already just like if you decapitate the behema, you take off the behema's head, you divide the behema in half, so it's no longer, even if there's still nerves moving, so it's not considered alive. So if you take out one of the legs and also it becomes hollow. No, the leg and also, so to speak, the shirish of the leg that's in the behema. So you have now a hole in the behema that came out with the leg. So then it's harizun nevelu metama b'magu b'masa afal pishe adayin b'chayin, even though it seems to be still alive, but lepel it has a din of a mess. V'chein imkara migaba, if you tore the behema from the back, and as you open the whole back to where the spine is, and you completely tore them apart. Imkara migaba eishen nishbara mafrekes v'reid basarima, or the neck bone completely got broken and also went through you cut open and you took off the most of the flesh which is on this neck bone, so it was also taken apart, severed from the animal, or at least torn off from where it normally is. So the din is arezu kinevela l'chol davar is nachama. A behema that was nishchata that's mefarcheses be'etzim is still alive. So unless there was a proper shchita, like a behema teira, so it has a din of a live behema, and memela since din of a live behema, so memela it's not matam b'shum nevela, and there's a din of eva menachai and basa menachai, etc. We're talking about again a behema tmei where there's no din shchita, or if there was a behema teira, which again there was no shchita, it was a shchita psula, so it has a din of a live. That's this din. And now there are certain situations where it seems to be it's mefarcheses, but it's no longer a din of a live. If the head was taken off, or it was completely cut into half, or his nikra migabe was torn from the back, the whole back open, the back part of the behema was torn apart, or the neck, the nishbara mafrekeshela, the neck bone together with reva basar was all taken off. So then that has a din of behema that's mess. Halacha beis behema shemes uber b'tech me'ah. Now uber b'tech me'ah of the behema is considered a chelik of the behema, and even if it's not alive anymore, so later on the shchita of the behema will be materit. So obviously this uber doesn't have a din of a nevela, because it's still something which potentially is like basar of the behema. It's basar of the behema. So memela, if you're going to go ahead and touch this uber while the uber is still b'meimei, so then you're not going to be tummy. That's the halacha beis. Behema shemes uber b'teich miyah v'heishet hareyes yodei v'nogabei bein b'mehema tmeya bein b'mehema teira. Whether this is talking about a behema tmeya or a behema teira, arizu an negiator achi yetzei hanefel laver elam. Once the nefel goes out laver elam, so then it becomes a separate entity. And since it's a separate entity and it's mess without shchita, so that's the din of a nevela. Halacha gimel. Basar haperish mebehema v'chaya kshem chay. So basar that was detached from the behema, you took off basar, flesh, from the behema while the behema was alive, bein tmei, bein teirim, whether we're talking about a behema tmei or a behema teira. So either way is Torah. There's no din of tumah to basar haperish min achai by a behema. Ve'enim metamer kinevel. That's talking about basar. Avol aver min achai haperish min, if an aver came off of a behema. minachai, so then the din is metamik in avail. So then the aver is metamik in avail. Is nochmal aver minachai by a behema is metamik in avail. Echad aver minachai haperish min behema atzmo. Aver haperish min ashlil shebebitna. Whether it was taken off from the actual behema or an aver that was taken off from the uber, which is b'me'eya behema. But lapel now you have an aver which was taken off before shchita. So the din is that aver is metamik in avail. V'hivarim ein lem shir afilu hoye keseira ipoches is metame. The smallest aver is also metame. Abavahu sheia aver kibriyasi, which is basar gidim vatzomis. It has to have an aver which has flesh and it has sinews, veins and vatzomis. And also v'yia olav basar kidei lalas aruka. There should be which is the same dinim that we had b'negeya tumas adam or b'negeya tumas hames. So we had the same dinam that it has to be an aver kibriyase, which is basar gidim vatzomis, and it has to have enough basar that if it would be alive, it would be able to heal itself, and this basar would be able to grow back. Hoya basar pachis mulahalus aruch kebachai. If there wasn't enough flesh that it should be able to heal itself, oy chaser atzmi, or there's something missing of the etzem, is tor. So nachamos, we're learning over that an aver minachai of a behema is matame, basar minachai is not matame, aver minachai is matame, but it has to have basar gidim v'atzomis, and it has to have basar k'dei lahalas aruka, but etzem has to have the whole etzem. It knows if even a mashu of the etzem is missing, so it's not the matame. Halacha dal hakulya, the kidney, v'haloshen, v'hasofu ki etzeben, is afal pishein avrim, they're all limbs, above eisen chalipen, and they don't grow back. However, hail vein b'metzim harim kebasar. So in order for something to have a din of a aver, it has to be basar gidim vatzomis. And these things, the kulya, the loshen, the tongue, and the sofa and the lip, is hail vein b'metzim is harim kebasar. Halacha hey habasar ha'aver hameduldolim bebehema u'bechaya she'enon yechelon lichyes ulahadvik b'sh'ar aguf. So you have either flesh or an aver which is hanging. In other words, it's like partially detached from the behema, but it's not completely detached. So in other words, it's detached enough that it could never really become a part of the behema itself. It can't ever heal itself to actually become again part of the behema as regular part of the behema. But on the other end, obviously it's attached. It's not decomposing. This basar hameduldan, this eva hameduldan, if it would be completely detached and there would be no chayas, so then they would be decomposed like something that was detached in behemoth. So on one hand it's attached, and on one hand it's not detached. So that's this din. So we say like this: Eina metamik in avail. It doesn't have a din of an eva menachai because since it's still connected to the behemoth, einachlam is meduldul and eina yachalichis, but lepel is still connected to the behemoth. Therefore, eina metamik in avail. It calls man shabehema b'chayim. But so we're saying it is attached. So l'chur it's also not mekabel to masechlin because a part of the behemoth is not mekabel to masechlin. And now we say no. V'harein kish'ar they have a din like oichel. Im huchshu mekabel to memkem. So that's this din. If you have a aver basar ameduldolim from a behemoth or a chaya, so then the din is that it's not an avela because it's attached. But on the other end, since it's meduldul, so therefore it could be mekabel to masechlin. But on the other end, it has to be huchshu. Because to be kabel to masechlin, you have to have akshar, you have to have mashkan. Yeah, that's the din at first. Now we're saying nishchat behema. What happens if this behema echaya was nishchat? So the din is huchsheru b'shchita. So they became huchsher b'shchita. The huchsher b'shchita that's considered muksher lekabel tuma. But on the other hand, ve'ena metama b'nevela. They're not metama b'nevela. In other words, lepel mamish. We said it didn't have a din of nevela. So while it was in the matzah, while it was alive, it didn't have a din of behema, of a nevela. And now that it was geschochten, so the shochten is not going to be matter this basar. The shochten is not going to be matter this basar. But on the other hand, now this basar is already huchsher. We said before, it's roy to be huchsher. So mele, it's huchsheru b'shchita ve'ena metam kinevela. But it's not metavik kinevela. She'ena shchita oisen k'mishapir shemichayim. If the Eva Menachai would have been Pirshim Michayim, so then he would have been Metamim. He would have been Metamim as Nevela. But we said before that he wasn't Eva Menachai. He was attached, and now it was Nishchat. So Memela, so it's not an Eva Menachai. And we don't say now to go back and say, well, now that the Behem is no longer alive, let's look at this Aver as if it was detached already Michayim. We don't say that. We'll soon see that in a case where it dies, we do say that. Avol im meisa behema, if the behema dies, so now habasa shayu meduldul ba, the basa which was meduldul, which needs hechsher, tzarech hechsher. It's tzarech hechsher. V'ha'ever is metame mishum ever menachai. And this aver has a din of ever menachai, and ve'eni tzarech hechsher, and ve'eni metame mishum ever menanevela. So in other words, this aver, on one hand, while he was alive, it didn't really have a din of ever menachai. L'chura, now that the behemoth dies, so l'chura, so obviously it's not, there's no chai, so what din should this aver be? So l'chura, the pastos would be that this din has a din of ever menames. In other words, it's not really coming from a nevela, because lepeil, it wasn't really so much part of this behemoth. But on the other hand, you have an aver of a behemoth that's no longer alive, and it's an aver, so l'chura, it's an aver of a nevela. So we say no. That right now, after it was hushkata, we look at it as if it was already detached, Michaim. That nipple is the Gemara learns it out from a pasuk. That you look at it as if it was a detached Michaim, and therefore as a din of Eva Menachai, it's Matami. And else Eva Menames, it certainly would be Matami. But we have a din that as a din of Eva Menachai, it's Matami. And then the Ram says, Umah bin Eva Menachai, Eva Menanavela. The mind of community, if it's Eva Menavela on Eva Menachai, Sof Kol Sof, it's Matami. Shabbos, Rab Perish Eva Menachai Tor. So in other words, Eva Menachai, the Aver, also an Aver is Matar. But if you'll take off a piece of basar from this Aver Menachai, the basar we learned before, basar from Achai is not Matami. So this basar that comes off the Aver Menachai is also not Matami. Masha'enkin ha-basar, ha-perish me-Aver Menanavela, Matami, because I is Mago B'masa. In other words, so an Eva Menanavela, so the basar of the Eva Menavela has a din of basar Menames. Memela, if you're going to detach this basar from the Eva Menanavela and you have a Kazayas, so it'll be Matami. So Memela, so that's the difference if it's considered an Eva Menachai or Eva Menames. If you have an basar Eva Meduldal Menabehema, so it doesn't have a din of detached, since it's Meduldal, so it's still attached and detached on one end. So it's still attached in the sense that it doesn't have a din of Matami Menavela. The Eva Menach, this Eva is not Matami, als Eva Menachai, because it's still attached. But on the other end, since it's partially detached, to the extent where it can't become completely attached again, so therefore it's already Mekabel to Masechel. That's din number one. Now we're saying, what happens by Nishchata, Nishchata Behema? So Nishchata Behema, so the Aver doesn't have a din of an Aver, the Nishchata Behema, so then the Aver doesn't have a din of an Aver Menachai, the Aver doesn't have a din of an Aver Menachai, and therefore, so the Aver is not Matami. There's no din of Aver being Matami, because this Aver, right now, it was never an Aver Menachai, because it was attached, and the Beim itself was Nishchata. So again, since it was Nishchata, so it didn't become an Aver from an Nevela either. So what din is? It's obviously not Mutter Bachila. It's not Mutter Bachila, but it's not Matami. It wasn't Matami while the Beim was alive, and it's not Matami while the Beim was Nishchata. That's this din. Masha'enkin, if the behemoth dies, there was never a nishchata. So now what kind of din does this aver have? So that's the chiddush, that this aver hameduldul doesn't have a din of an aver from a nevela, because l'chorah the behemoth that it was attached to died. It has a din as if it was an aver menachai, and that's l'kula. What's the kula that it's an aver menachai? It's a kula that it's an aver menachai, that the basa that will be paid from this aver won't be matam. That's this n'kula. The din of Eva Menachai and Eva Menames is the same shear. There's no difference. The din of Eva Menachai and Eva Menames is the same shear that has the Basir Gidon Vatzomis in his Bekolshu. Halacha Vov. Treifa Shenishchata Shchita Ksheira. You have a behem which is a treifa, so therefore the Shchita is not going to be matter the behema bachila, that's the Isra of treifa, but nevertheless, that this Shchita we're soon going to learn, Afal Pi Shehi Asura Bachila, even though this treifa is going to be asura be'achilu because it's a treifa. Nevertheless, it's not mitame. It doesn't have a din of a nevela. A nevela, a behema that dies without shchita, is mitame als nevela. A behema that was geschochten, even though the shchita is not going to be materit b'achila, but nevertheless, the shchita is going to off that it doesn't have a din of a nevela and it's not mitame. V'chein, ha'shechet is a behema, umotze ba'uber mes, and the uber which is in the behema was mess. The shchita simei mitayrosim midei nevela. So the shchita simei tu zuf that it's not a nevela. Now motzeba ben shmei nechai nitraf. A person finds a behema. This wasn't nishchatima. You find in a behema that wasn't nishchat a ben shmei nechai which is a treifa. Is afal pi shenishchat achar shenitraf, even though it was geschochten, ein schitose mitarosim in the nevela. Lefisha ein lemina schita. So in other words, you have an uber that was a ben shmeina chai, and this uber has a din of a treifa. The uber has a din of a treifa, it can't live. And lepel, you went ahead and shechted this uber. So even though normally a behemoth that's a treifa, when you shech the behemoth that's a treifa, it's matter at least the behemoth that it shouldn't be an avela. But this uber, which was a ben shmeina chai, even also has a din of a treifa. And lechura, if you shechted it, so lechura the shchita should be matter, they shouldn't have a din of avela. So that's what he's saying. No, ein shchitasi mitaros b'dein avela, because there's no musig of a shchita on a ben shmeina chai. The behemoth that's a treifa, it's a regular behemoth. Just it has a psasim that's a treifa. So yesh b'mine shchita. This behemoth is a musog of shchita. It's just that the pale the shchita is not going to be matter because there's a nekav in the reya. So therefore, this shchita is matar. This behemoth is a regular shchita, and this matar the behemoth midei nevela. Masha'inkin, when we're dealing with an uber which was ben shmei nachai, so ein b'mine shchita, and since ein b'mine shchita, so that shchita doesn't moitzi this uber from having a din of an avail. Leficha vlad behema shelisho shiva yom gemurim, and we're not really sure whether it was an eifel or not. So therefore, im shochate betech shiva ein shchitasim mitarosim de nevela but neishu kenefel. Because it's a suffix nefel. You always choishish. Maybe it's an eifel because lepel. If it waits 8 days, so just like by a adam, when it comes to the 30th day, is yotzim midin nefel. So by a behema, once it reaches the 8th day, so then it's yotzim miklal nevela. But until it reaches the 8th day, if you do it during the first 7 days, so it wasn't yotzim miklal nefel. So it's always a suffix nefel. Halacha zayin. Hasheichad is a behema umatzaba ben tishachai. Kedim sheyahalach halakarki. Before this behema starts walking, so the behema is still b'mei imei, and lepel the mother was already geschochten. Is afal pisha eni tzor shchita k'meisha b'yarnu sharei shchita imei metarosi. The shchita was metar this uber which was b'mei imei that was nishchat. But nevertheless, so l'chur it's an extension of the mother. But lepel nitmas imei, if this behema after it was geschochten is going to become tamei, is lei nitmahu. This behema, which is an extension of the mother to the extent where the shchita of the mother was metired, but lepel, the fact that her mother, or the mother of this uber is going to become tamei, is going to make the uber tamei. Nitmasime le nitmahu. Vim neslableim, and then if the mother became an avela l'mashal, so no, there was no shchita. He tried to make a shchita on the mother, and lepel the behema, and there was no a kosher shchita. So now the behema is an avela, or the behemoth died, is harei hitor. But the uber, which is bnei imei, it's nitter through the shchita simei, but it doesn't become tumah through the tumah simei, and it doesn't become an avela through the mother becoming an avela. Shein achayim mistamei letumah seichem letumah nevelas. V'afal bishuk ever meivara, even though it's an ever meivara on one end, legabe that it could be huter b'shchita simei, but on the other end, since it's fortachai, so therefore it can become tamei, and it also can become an avela. It can become an avail. The im mes kedem shiafres al gabi karka. If it dies, kedem shiafres al gabi karka. In other words, it was nishchat teimei, and then it was mes kedem shiafres al gabi karka. Harei tor sheshchita simei metarase. So it can't become an avail on its own either. It can't become an avail on its own once it was geschochten. It doesn't become an avail through the mother dying, but once the mother was geschochten, so it can become an avail on its own either because lepela doesn't shchita. So memela shchita is imei metaras. Halacha ches. Treifa shenishchata is afal pi shehi teira min hateira, as we learned. Aber im nogaba kedesh nitma. Legabi kedesh, this treifa shenishchata has a din of tumah. Midivrei seifrim v'zu maila yiseiru shasa b'kedesh. It's a special maila that they gave to kedesh that the behema that treifa shenishchata is mitami kedesh. Halacha tes. Behema hamak shalelit. The hoitzi hu uber is yodei, and the uber was meitzi yodei while it was being makshalelit. V'chotcha, so you cut off this yad of the behema which was sticking out of the recha. Now v'achar kach shochat asimei, then you shechted the mother. So the din is ha'eva shenechtach nevela. That eva which was cut off as a nevela is an eva menachai. In other words, there was eva that was taken off the uber before the shchita. It was eva shenechtach nevela. Ushar psaro uber, but the rest of the basa which was inside the store. That's the din. That's din number one. So if you cut it off before shchita, and then you shechter it, so what you cut off has a din of an avela, even menachai, and the rest of it has a din of Torah. Now, shochet esime v'achar kachotcha, while the yad was sticking out, you went ahead and shechted the mother. So lepel, the yad that was sticking out doesn't become kosher, because that's the din of basa basoda treifa. We learn out that kol sheyotza chutz l'mechitzasei, since it's chutz l'mechitzasei, it's not niter b'shchitasei. So that yad that was sticking out has a din of a treifa. So the din is azay. There's a efer ketreifa shenishchata. The efer has a din of nishchata. So Mele is be'etzem, it's not matame. It's not matame because a treifa shenishchata. Sha'ar psar ha'uba. So it's maga treifa shchuta. There's a din of maga treifa shchuta. What's the din of a maga treifa shchuta? Shehu matame is hakedesh. Be'emes treifa shchuta is not matame. So Mele, this yad that was sticking out, which has a din of a treifa shchuta, because since it was sticking out, it wasn't niter through the shchita. But it has a din of a treifa, because sof kol sof, it was part of the animal, so it has a din of a treifa, so it has a din of a treifa shchuta. It's not mutter bachila, but it's on the other end, it's not matame, but it is matame kedesh. So in Mele, the basar, which is touching this yad, which is sticking out, has a din of maga of a treifa shenishchata, which is gabi kedesh, has a din of tumah. Lochamal. Shochet esim. If while the hand was sticking out, you shechted the imay v'achar kachotcha, so the hever is ketreifa shenishchata. Has a din of a treifa shenishchata, so it's aser bachila, but on the other end, it's not matame. Aber sh'ar psar ober, maga treifa shchuta, which means shu matame sakedesh. Avalei satruma, because it was only a mile be kedesh, not truma. Now hoitze ha'uber is yodei, ben shchita simen l'shchita simen v'chotche. So over here, on one hand, there was already a shchita on this yad, while the first siman was nishchat while the yad was inside. Now the second siman was nishchat while the yad was already outside. So the question is, what's the din? So we say, v'chatche is mitztarev shchita siman l'siman l'tar ever m'dein avela. You can't be mata the aver, because the aver, since the aver has a din of a treifa, so it's like Hilo, the behema became a treifa before the gemara shchita. For behema becomes a treifa before gemara shchita, so there was no shchita gemura on a behema. There wasn't a treifa. So this, but on the other end, since lepel, there wasn't a complete shchita on this uber on this yad, because it was only one siman. So we say no, but the lepel, there was already a good shchita, which is the chavada good shchita on this yad while the yad was still inside, and now there was another shchita of the next siman while the yad was outside. So the mitzvah of the two, and I'll quote on him, the yad is not mutter bachila, because the lepel didn't have a proper shchita, it was a treifa by the end of the shchita. But on the other end, it's not matame, because lepel it had a proper shchita. It had a proper shchita for a treifa. So mitzvah shchita siman l'tar ever m'dein avela. So the aver is not an avela, the aver is a treifa. That's it. Halacha yud. Shchitas hanochri nevela. When a goy shechts, it has a din of an avela. U'metame b'masa. V'afilu Yisrael emed al gavav. Take out the ve'im, it says ve'im, but because it's one sentence. V'afilu Yisrael emed al gavav. V'shochad b'sakin yofa. Shchita koroi, this goy shechted b'sakin yofa, and there was a Yisrael emed al gavav, and there was shchita koroi, so nevertheless it has a din of an avela. And echad anochri, v'echad akuti, a gerteshav, all of these dinim are shchitas in nevela. So the first zach is that the shchita is a din of a nevela and it's matame. Then the Ram continues, v'korav be'inai, sha'av zeh midivrei seifrim, that this din, that shchitas anochri is a nevela and has a din of matame b'masa, is midrabon, midivreim, kemei sheyizbor, sha'av zeh midivrei seifrim, sha'arei. Why did the Rabbanon make such a din? Shari tumas avidah zorah. The Thomas to craft the midivreim, Kameshi Yisbar. There's a Tumas Avodah Zarah, and also Takrevis Avodah Zarah has a din also of Tumah. Ubiklal Avodah Zarah, because of the Tumas Avodah Zarah, is Nisrachu Akutim, and others Gershis Agoyim, and Anochrim. We're not talking about Lav Dafke Kutim. Nisrachu Agoyim, V'nesr Shchitos. So since the Seder of the Takrevis Avodah Zarah is first is a Shchita, so they made that all Shchitas of Goyim should have a din of an Avela, and it's metame b'masa. That's this din. So the Rambam is being machadish that the fact that a goy is only the shchitas of a goy is metame, the shchita of an avela is metame, is only on mid divrei sefer. Now the shchita of a nevela of a goy is definitely not mutar b'achila. The Rambam say they say behem shivim tamer v'alei asura b'achila din teira. That's posh that we learn out from a pasuk that a shchita of a goy is osir to eat. So that the Rambam says leikol osir b'achila mitami. Shahari atreif is also asura. Atreif is also asura utahira. And memela, so we see there's a musig of a shchita, which on one hand it's not matter to eat, but on the other hand it's not it makes it ois nevela. So al der is that we see by a treifa the shchita of a treifa on one hand it's not matter to eat, but on the other hand the tuzuv that it's not a nevela. So al der is that the Rambam is saying that minatera the shchita of a goy is not matter to eat. It doesn't have that inyan of being matter to eat, but on the other hand it is a shchita. And since it's a shchita, so it means that it's not an avela, and therefore it's not matame. The bus is not matame. That's the shita of the Rambam. The Ravid argues, and the Rosh argues, and a very big tumult about it. The Rebbe brings from the Rogatshova, a ganze machlekas, the Havon in the machlekas of the Rambam Ravid, whether a goy is a metzias or not, and the metzias of a shchita of a goy, could that have a din of a psadin shchita? The Arichos and Chelik Yudches, and Chelik Chof also there is about it. But this machlekas, the Rambam and the Ravid. Then the Ram continues, V'yefshel lechayiv koros al tumazu al bias migdash v'achilus kadoshev el b'raya brur. So the Ram is like saying the Yeroli, this is by him, but the B'korav Beina, it's not a Lashon of B'korav Beina, it doesn't say Beifim Vadois. Yeroli is a stronger Vadois, Yeroli. That's the way he holds. He holds it without a mocker. But over here it's nicht azay like 100, like B'korav Beina. It's B'korav Beina, and the Ram says, if you're going to bring a Raya Brura fakert, so then you could go ahead and mechayiv koros. But lepel until there's a raya brura, so it's korav beina that he's not, that it's not menatera. So therefore he's not chayiv koros, which obviously means he can't bring a carbon. He can't bring a carbon. He'll bring a carbon. It's a suffix of chulun bazar. Halacha yudalef. Kul yis hanavela. Kul yis hanavela, like the Rambam say behemshech, and he said already before, is a bone which is closed from both sides. In other words, you have a bone which is closed from both sides, but inside there's marrow, and that marrow has a din of basar. So the din is hanegea ba, someone that touches this bone. So a bone is not matame. The marrow is matame. The bone is not matame. And lepel, since it's close, you can't get to the bone. So therefore, hanegea ba ehanesa tar. So the reason why hanegea ba is tar, because when you touch a bone, you're tar. Touching a bone is not matame. And on the other hand, so why is hanoisi? But l'chore, you're carrying the marrow which is in the bone. So over here, the din is shekol dover min hanavela she'eini metame b'maga is also eini metame b'masa. So in other words, here we have this rule. The rule is the Ram mentioned earlier that kol she'eini metame b'maga eini metame b'masa. So Mela, since this kulius and avela can be metame b'maga, why? Because technically you can't get to it. So Mela, so this basa which technically you can't get to, and therefore it's not metame b'maga, is also not metame b'masa. Now, nikva koshu, there's a little hole in the bone, so technically you could get to it. Even it's a little hole, a hair of yours could go into that bone and be metame, because the hair is also mekabel, you mekabel tumah through a hair of yours touching. Is nikva koshu, is anigeba, if you touch it, oy noisa, is tummy. So now you're tummy, because if you're negeba, you're tummy. So once there's a possibility of negeba, so then noisa is also tummy. Now, b'dmad mamurim that we're saying, that the bone is not metame is b'shahaya hameach sheba miskashkish. In other words, the marrow dried up, and since it dried up, so memela you could hear it already. It's no longer attached to the inside of the bone. It's like just dried up marrow inside, which you could hear it chuckling inside. Share'ene ma'ila. So therefore, this bone, since you're hearing it miskashkish, so obviously it's never going to be able to heal itself. It doesn't have the life in it to be able to heal itself, if it would have been alive. But if the marrow of the bone is not miskashish, it's attached to the inside of the of the bone. In other words, it's aimed b'mkeme, so it's regular fresh marrow. Is in yeshbe kidei lahalis aruka le'etzme b'chutz. A bone, there's a bone. This is talking about while the behem is alive. So the bone, because of the marrow, so there could be flesh that could grow onto this bone as a result of the marrow which is in the bone. So in yeshbe kidei lahalis le'etzme. So now this bone has a din of an Eva min achai. Now he has a new din of an Eva min ames, an Eva min anavela. Now it's a din Eva min anavela. So then the whole Eva is mitami. Also the bone. The bone is also mitami. It's Eva because the bone is part of the Eva. So So if you're being metame als the basar, you have to be negeh bebasar. You can't be negeh be'etzem. Masha'in ken, if you be metame als the aver min hames, so the aver min hames, the bone is also part of that aver. So that's what we're saying. Yesh bekedei lahalas haruka le'etzem bachutz. So then is hareze metame b'maga b'masik kol ivar. So then it has in of an aver from an avela, an aver from an avela is metame. And over here, there's no din that the bone is also part of the aver. So Mamela, therefore, it is metame. It is nachamos. So if you have kulyas, if you have a kulyas and avela, so it depends. If the kulyas behem is not miskashkish, so it has a din of an aver. So then it's metame. It's metame maga b'mas, regardless of what size it is. Masha'inkin, if it's miskashkish, so Mamela doesn't have a din of an aver minha mes, or an aver which has a din of an aver, which is, or it is, but it can't be my laruka. So then it has to be royal l'tambe b'maga. It has to have some little hole in it. If it has a little hole in it, so it's royal l'tambe b'maga. Once it has a hole, it's royal l'tambe b'maga. So Mamela it's also metambe b'masa. But if it's not, doesn't have a hole, so it's not metambe b'maga, and it's also not metambe b'masa. It's not the rule that kol she'eni metambe b'maga, any metambe b'masa. Kvar pirashnu shakul yis yoetzem hasosum mikol tztod. Allah Yud Beis. Kul yis shechoshev olav l'nokva v'adayin l'nikva. You didn't put a hole in it, but you have in mind to put a hole. Is over here an negeba suffik tummy. Someone that touches this kul yis is a suffik tummy. Sheriyesh b'davar suffik im mechusa nekiva ki mechusa ma'aseh. Since you're intending on making a hole in it, so therefore you're able to. So then you'll be able to touch it. So memela. So then the whole bone becomes also like a yad, bisyad to the basar. It becomes a bisyad to the basar. And then when you touch the bone after it has a hole, so even if you don't put anything inside the bone, but the bone becomes a bisyad to the basar. That's only if the basar is accessible. Mashenkin, if the basar is not accessible, so then when you touch the bone, so you're not tummy. It's nothing. So when you're touching a bone that you indict l'nokva, so the question is, does it have then a din also of a bisyat l'basar or not? And if it does, so then it would be metame. So the Ram says it's a suffix. Kol yesh shechishav l'nakva v'adayin l'nikva regeba suffix tamish. Shari yesh b'dav suffix. Mechus nekiva ke mechus ma'isa elay.